My father's hands shook as he held the DNA test results. 60 people watched in complete silence. His face went white, then gray. Then he dropped to his knees right there on the stage. "This can't be right," he whispered. I stood next to him, holding a microphone. "Read it out loud, Dad. Tell everyone what it says." He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. Real tears. I'd never seen him cry before. Not once in 28 years. 0% match, he read. His voice cracked. "Tori shows 0% match with Gerald Mason." The room exploded. Aunts gasped. Uncles started talking all at once. My mom covered her mouth with both hands. But I wasn't done. Not even close. "Keep reading, Dad. There's more." His hands shook harder. 0% match with Diane Mason. Now, everyone went completely silent. You could hear the chandelier crystals tinkling in the breeze from the air conditioner. My Uncle Rob stood up. "Wait. What does that mean?" I smiled. Not a happy smile. A 28 years of pain smile. "It means Dad spent my whole life calling Mom a cheater." He was wrong. Mom never had an affair. But here's the really fun part. I nodded toward the side door. It opened. A woman walked in. Brown hair. Brown eyes. Same strong jaw as my brother Tyler. Same dimple on her left cheek as my dad. "This is Emma Clark," I said. "She was born 11 minutes before me. Same hospital. Same night. March 15th, 1997. My dad stared at Emma like she was a ghost. "A nurse mixed us up," I continued. "The hospital knew that same night. And they covered it up for 28 years. But to understand why this moment shattered my world, we have to go back 28 years. Back to a hospital in Portland, Oregon. Back to the night 2 baby girls were born 11 minutes apart. Back to the mistake that destroyed 2 families. Before we get into this, I need to ask you something. Would you forgive a parent who called you a liar your whole life? Who treated you like you didn't belong? Let me know in the comments. Because what my dad did, I'm still not sure I can forgive it. Now, let me tell you how we got here. I'm Tori Mason. I'm 28 years old. And for as long as I can remember, my father said I was too pretty to be his daughter. He meant it as an insult. "Look at that blonde hair," he'd say to my mom. "Where did that come from?" Not from me. My dad has dark brown hair. So does my mom. So does my older brother Tyler. Everyone in our family has dark hair and brown eyes. Except me. I have blonde hair and bright blue eyes. And my dad decided that meant my mom had cheated on him. I was 7 the first time I really understood. I was listening outside my parents' bedroom. Mom was crying. "Where did she come from, Diane?" Dad yelled. "Tell me the truth." "She's yours, Gerald." I never cheated. I would never. Then explain the blonde hair. Explain those blue eyes. Genetics are complicated. My grandmother had blonde hair. "I don't believe you." I heard something hit the wall. Maybe a shoe. Maybe a book. "You've been lying to me for 7 years, Dad said. And I'm done pretending." From that night on, everything changed. When I was 12, I wanted to play volleyball. Dad refused to sign the permission slip. "I'm not wasting money on someone else's kid," he told me. That same week, Tyler got new basketball shoes. $200. When I turned 18, Tyler went to college. University of Oregon. Dad paid for everything. Tuition, dorm, meal plan, spending money. Tyler didn't work a single job. I got into nursing school. Good grades. Scholarship offers. I was so excited. I showed Dad the acceptance letter at dinner. He barely looked at it. "Your real father can pay for that." So I took out student loans. $60,000. I worked at a diner called Rosie's. Double shifts. Night shifts. Weekend shifts. I ate ramen noodles for 6 years straight. I graduated with my nursing degree and a mountain of debt. Dad came to my graduation. He sat in the back. He left before the ceremony ended. The worst part wasn't the money. It was watching what Dad's accusations did to Mom. Every fight they had came back to me. Every argument. Every disagreement about anything. Bills. vacations, Tyler's career. It all circled back to the same thing. If you hadn't cheated, if Tori was really mine, if you'd just tell me the truth. Mom tried everything. She showed him her grandmother's photo. Blonde hair, blue eyes, proof that it ran in her family. Dad ripped up the photo. You probably faked this too. She offered to take a DNA test. Multiple times. I don't trust any test you arrange, he said. You'd just fake the results. 5 years ago, I got a call at 2 a.m. My grandma found Mom in the bathroom. Empty pill bottle next to her. The ambulance got there in time. Barely. Mom spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Then 3 months in therapy. She's been on antidepressants ever since. Dad never apologized. He never even visited her in the hospital. This is what guilty people do, he told me. They can't handle the truth catching up to them. I stopped trying to have a relationship with him after that. I saw him at holidays. I was polite, but I kept my distance. Then I met Nathan. Nathan Reed. Architect. Kind eyes. Patient smile. He proposed after 2 years. I said yes immediately. We planned a small wedding. Nothing fancy. Just family and close friends at a garden venue. I invited Dad. I didn't expect him to come, but I invited him anyway. His response came at Sunday dinner 6 weeks before the wedding. And that's when everything exploded. Sunday dinners at my parents' house were torture. But Mom begged me to come. So I went. For her. The house was huge. 6 bedrooms in the rich part of Portland. Dad loved reminding everyone he'd earned it himself. The dining room had expensive furniture. Crystal glasses. China plates Mom polished every single week. My grandma Betty sat at the end of the table. Silver hair pulled back tight. Watching Dad like a hawk watches a snake. Tyler sat across from me. He's 31. He's always been Dad's favorite. The golden child who could do no wrong. Mom sat next to Dad, gripping her napkin like a lifeline. Then Dad cleared his throat. I won't be attending your wedding, Tori. The words hit like a slap. Mom's fork clattered onto her plate. Gerald, please. Not tonight. But Dad was already reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a folded paper and slid it across the table to me. I've thought about this a long time, he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. I won't walk another man's daughter down the aisle. Not until we settle this. I looked at the paper. It was a consent form. DNA paternity test. From a clinic downtown. His name already signed at the bottom. You have 6 weeks, Dad continued. Take the test. Share the results with the whole family. If you're mine, I'll come to your wedding. I'll even apologize. He smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. But we both know what the test will show. Grandma Betty's teacup hit the saucer hard. Crack. Mom started crying. Silent tears running down her face. Tyler stared at his plate. And I sat there looking at Dad's expensive watch. Thinking about 28 years of this. 28 years of being called a mistake. A liar. Proof of a crime that never happened. I didn't sign the paper that night. I didn't yell either. I just said, thank you for the reminder, Dad. I'll remember this. And I meant every word. I drove back to my apartment. Nathan was waiting on the couch. He had wine poured. He took one look at my face and knew. What did he do this time? I told him everything. The DNA form. The 6-week deadline. The ultimatum. Nathan's jaw got tight. Maybe you should just do it. Take the test. Prove him wrong. Shut him up forever. I set down my wine glass. It's not about proving him wrong anymore. It's about freeing Mom. Nathan went quiet. He knew what I meant. After Mom's suicide attempt, I made a decision. I couldn't change the past. But maybe I could change the future. Maybe I could finally get Dad to admit he was wrong. That Mom never cheated. That his 28 years of accusations were based on nothing but his own paranoia. I'll take the test, I told Nathan. But I'll do it my way. I pulled up a lab on my phone. True Gene Labs. Independent. Certified. Not connected to Dad in any way. If I'm doing this, I'm doing it right. 2 weeks later, Dad turned 60. Mom threw him a party at the River Club. Private dining room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River. 50 relatives there to celebrate. I wore a simple black dress. Nathan squeezed my hand as we walked in. 2 hours, he whispered. We can survive 2 hours. We couldn't. Halfway through dinner, Dad stood up to give a speech. He thanked everyone for coming. He praised Tyler for his amazing finance career. He raised his glass to Mom for her patience. Then his eyes found me. I see my daughter is here tonight. The word daughter dripped with sarcasm. A few people laughed uncomfortably. I hope she's been thinking about our conversation. About proving where she really comes from. The room went quiet. Dad, Tyler said. Maybe not now. Dad waved him off. No, this is exactly the right time. Families should be honest with each other. He smiled at me. That cold smile I knew so well. You know what they call a bird that lays its eggs in another bird's nest? A cuckoo. The cuckoo's egg looks beautiful, but it doesn't belong. Someone gasped behind me. A cousin snickered. Mom stared at her lap, tears dripping onto her bracelet. The gilt bracelet Dad gave her after one of their worst fights. I stood up. Every eye in the room turned to me. Thank you for the reminder, Dad. I'll remember this. Then I walked to Mom. Want to get some air? She took my hand. We walked out together. Past the whispers. Past the stairs. Past the man who'd spent 28 years trying to destroy us both. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Grandma Betty caught up to us in the parking lot. Her heels clicked on the pavement like gunshots. Tori, wait. I turned. Grandma Betty was 78 years old. Straight back. Sharp eyes. She'd never liked Dad. There's something I need to tell you, she said. She looked back to make sure Dad hadn't followed. Something I should have told you years ago. She led us to a bench. The sun was setting. Orange and pink sky. Grandma's voice dropped to a whisper. The night you were born, something strange happened at St. Mary's Hospital. Mom stiffened next to me. The nurse who brought you out. She looked terrified. Her hands were shaking. She handed you to Diane too fast. Then she practically ran out of the room. Mom, Diane said, you never told me this. I tried to find out what happened. I called the hospital. Asked questions. They stonewalled me. Said everything was normal. All records sealed. Grandma reached into her purse. She pulled out an old yellow paper. But I made a copy of your birth record before they locked everything down. She handed it to me. Time of birth, 11:47 p.m. My heart stopped. I gave birth at 11:58, Mom said slowly. I remember the clock. The doctor joked about you almost being born on a different day. 11 minutes. Something happened in those 11 minutes. There's more, Grandma said. The head nurse that night, Margaret Palmer. She retired 10 years ago. Grandma pulled out another paper. An address. I think she knows what happened. The next morning I walked into TrueGene Labs with 3 DNA samples. Mine was easy. A cheek swab in a sterile tube. Mom's was voluntary. She gave it to me the night before. Tears in her eyes but steady hands. Whatever this shows, she said, you're my daughter. Nothing changes that. Dad's sample was stolen. A few hairs from his brush in the guest bathroom. The bathroom I'd used every holiday for years. The technician was a calm woman named Dr. Lopez. She explained everything. Results in 3 weeks. Legally valid. Completely confidential. I paid extra for rush processing. Grandma insisted on covering the cost. That afternoon, I called Margaret Palmer. The phone rang 6 times. Then a woman answered. Older voice. Trembling. Hello. Mrs. Palmer? My name is Tori Mason. I was born at St. Mary's Hospital on March 15, 1997. I believe you were the head nurse that night. Silence. Mrs. Palmer? I can't help you. The words came fast. Panicked. Please, I just need to ask. I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't contact me again. Click. I stared at my phone. Nathan looked up from his computer. What happened? She hung up on me. But not before she panicked. An innocent person would have been confused. Margaret Palmer was terrified. Whatever happened that night in 1997, she'd been carrying it for 28 years. 3 days later, the email arrived. Not to me. Dad wasn't that subtle. He sent it to our entire extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins. People I hadn't seen since childhood. 62 recipients total. The subject line: regarding Tori's wedding. I read it in my car, parked outside the hospital where I worked. Hands shaking. Dear family, as many of you know, I have carried a burden for 28 years. I have watched my wife refuse to admit the truth about Tori's parentage. I asked Tori to take a DNA test and share the results before her wedding. She has refused. I believe this speaks for itself. Until this matter is resolved publicly, I will not attend the ceremony. Attached is a family photo from Tori's christening. I invite you to look closely and draw your own conclusions. Regards, Gerald Mason. The attachment was a photo from Grandma's mantle. Me at 3 months old. Blonde hair, blue eyes, pale skin, surrounded by Dad, Tyler, and a dozen brown-haired relatives. Dad had circled my face in red, added a caption, "Spot the difference." Within hours, the responses flooded in. Some defended Mom. Most just asked questions. Careful, probing, curious about the drama. Tyler called that night. "Just do what Dad wants," he said, voice tight. "You're making this worse. You're ruining his reputation." I actually laughed. His reputation? That's what you're worried about. He hung up. 3 weeks after I submitted the samples, the email from TrueGene arrived. 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Nathan was traveling for work. Boston. A project he couldn't reschedule. I was alone in our apartment. Half-eaten salad on the coffee table. TV on, but not really watching. The subject line was clinical. Your DNA analysis results. Secure document. I enter my password. Verified my identity. Opened the PDF. Then I read it 3 times because the first 2 times the words didn't make sense. Subject A, Tori Mason, shows 0% genetic match with Subject B, Gerald Mason. I expected that. I'd prepared for it. But then came the second line. Subject A, Tori Mason, shows 0% genetic match with Subject C, Diane Mason. I stopped breathing. 0%. Not my father's daughter. Not my mother's daughter. I called TrueGene's after-hours line. Voice cracking. Demanding to speak with someone who could explain this. A technician walked me through the results. No contamination. No errors. No possibility of mistake. The samples were clear. The science was conclusive. I was not related to either of my parents, which meant Mom had never cheated. Dad was wrong about that for 28 years. But it also meant something else. Something impossible. If Mom didn't have an affair, if she'd been faithful like she always claimed, then how was I not her biological daughter? I sat on my kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, phone in my lap, staring at the ceiling. For 28 years, Dad called Mom a cheater. For 28 years, he was wrong about the affair. But he was right about one thing. I wasn't his daughter. The question was, whose daughter was I? I drove to my parents' house the next morning. 10 a.m. Late enough that Dad would be at his golf game. Early enough that Mom would be in the sunroom. She looked up when I walked in. Her face immediately showed concern. "Tori, what's wrong?" I sat down and handed her my phone. The TrueGene report on the screen. I watched her read it. Watched the color drain from her face. Watched her lips move silently as she read the numbers again and again. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wild. "This is wrong," she whispered. "This has to be wrong." I called the lab. Triple-checked everything. "There's no mistake, Mom. But I gave birth to you." Her voice rose, cracking. "I was in labor for 14 hours. I felt you. I saw you. You were mine." I took her hands. Ice cold. "I believe you," I said. Which means there's only one explanation. The silence stretched between us. "Something happened at the hospital," I continued. "Someone switched us." Mom's eyes went wide. "The time," she said suddenly. The birth certificate says 11:47. But I remember watching the clock. You were born at 11:58. I always wondered about that. 11 minutes. 11 minutes that changed two families forever. Mom, I said carefully, if I'm not your biological daughter, that means your real daughter is out there somewhere. Mom started crying. Not silent tears. Deep, shaking sobs. We have to find her, she managed. We have to find them both. Dad found out about the DNA test before I could prepare. Tyler saw the TrueGene email on Mom's phone while visiting for lunch. Within an hour, my phone was ringing. Dad's voice was triumphant. What did it say? Was I right? I didn't answer. I couldn't figure out how to explain that he was right and wrong at the same time. My silence told him everything. I knew it. He laughed. Actually laughed. Pure vindication. 28 years, Tori. 28 years I've been saying this. And I was right all along. Dad. Does your mother know? Of course she knows. She's probably crying right now, trying to figure out how to spin this. I could hear him pacing. I'm sending another email to everyone. This time with proof. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're not my daughter. Your mother lied for 3 decades. And now everyone will know exactly what kind of woman Diane Mason really is. He hung up before I could explain. Within the hour, Dad called Mom and told her to pack her bags. I want you out by the end of the month, he said. I'm done with your lies. Grandma drove over immediately. When I arrived that evening, I found them both in the living room. Mom curled on the couch like a wounded animal. Grandma standing guard. He thinks he's won, I said quietly. Grandma looked at me with sharp eyes. Then let's show him the rest of the story. The next 3 days were the hardest of my life. I considered canceling the wedding, not because of Dad, but because I couldn't bear the thought of Mom's vindication being overshadowed by champagne and white dresses. Nathan refused. We're getting married, he said, holding my face in his hands. Period. Your father's issues are not our issues. But I couldn't move forward without the truth. And the truth was locked inside Margaret Palmer's memory. I called her again and again. 5 times in 3 days. Each call went straight to voicemail. On the 6th try, I left a different message. Mrs. Palmer, my name is Tori Mason. I know you remember that name. I have DNA evidence. Certified, legally admissible DNA evidence that proves babies were switched at St. Mary's Hospital on March 15, 1997. I paused. Steadied my breath. I'm not looking to blame you. I'm not looking to sue anyone. I just need to know who I am. Another pause. If you don't call me back, my next call will be to a lawyer. I'll subpoena the hospital records. I'll file a formal investigation. And whatever you've been hiding for 28 years will come out in the worst possible way. I waited 1 hour. 2. At 4:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Thursday, 2 p.m. River Diner on MLK Boulevard. Come alone. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I texted back. I'll be there. Whatever Margaret Palmer had been carrying for 28 years, she was finally ready to let it go. River Diner was the kind of place time forgot. Vinyl booths patched with duct tape. A jukebox playing oldies. Coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the 90s. Margaret Palmer sat in the corner booth, back to the wall. She was 72. Smaller than I'd imagined. Silver hair pulled into a tight bun. Hands trembling against her coffee cup. She looked up when I sat down. You look just like her, she said quietly. Linda, your biological mother. Same hair. Same eyes. My heart stuttered. You know who my biological mother is? Margaret closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, they were wet. I've carried this for 28 years, she said. Every single day. Wondering if I did the right thing staying quiet. She reached into her purse and pulled out a worn leather notebook. Pages yellowed with age. This is my shift log from March 15, 1997. The night you were born. She opened it to a flagged page and slid it across the table. I read her handwriting. My blood running cold with every line. 11:47 p.m. Baby girl number 1 born to Diane Mason. Healthy. 7 pounds 2 ounces. 11:58 p.m. Baby girl number 2 born to Linda Clark. Healthy. 6 pounds 4 ounces. 12:32 a.m. Incident. Trainee nurse mixed up infants after bathing. Realized error at 2:15 a.m. Both families had already bonded. 2:45 a.m. Meeting with hospital administrator. Decision made. Correct records, not families. Less traumatic for everyone. NDA required for all staff present. I looked up at Margaret. Hands shaking. They knew, I whispered. They knew that night. And they covered it up. The administrator said it would cause more harm to switch you back. Margaret's voice cracked. Both mothers had already held their babies. Fed them. Named them. She pulled out another paper. A printout from a social media profile. A woman my age. Brown hair. Brown eyes. A smile that looked exactly like Tyler's. Her name is Emma Clark, Margaret said. She's 28 years old. She lives in Seattle. She teaches elementary school. Margaret looked at me with eyes full of decades of guilt. And she's your mother's biological daughter. That night I sat in my apartment with my laptop open to Emma Clark's Facebook profile. 3rd grade teacher at Roosevelt Elementary. Graduate of University of Washington. Volunteer at the animal shelter. Her profile picture showed a woman with brown hair and warm brown eyes, standing in front of a classroom decorated with colorful posters. She looked exactly like what Tyler might look like if he'd been born a woman. I composed the message 17 times before finally hitting send. Hi Emma. This is going to sound completely insane. My name is Tori Mason. I was born at St. Mary's Hospital in Portland on March 15, 1997. The same night and place as you. I recently did a DNA test that showed I'm not biologically related to either of my parents. I've spoken with a nurse who was working that night. She confirmed that 2 babies were accidentally switched. I believe you're the biological daughter of Diane and Gerald Mason. And I believe I'm the biological daughter of Linda Clark. I have documentation. I have a witness statement. I'm not looking for anything from you. I just thought you deserved to know the truth. If you're willing to talk, please call me. I included my phone number and closed the laptop. 24 hours passed. I checked my phone every 10 minutes. Then, at 9:38 p.m., my phone rang. Is this Tori? The voice was shaky, uncertain, but something in it felt familiar. Emma? A long pause. A shuddering breath. My whole life, people told me I don't look like my parents. My dad used to joke that maybe the hospital made a mistake. She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I guess it wasn't a joke. Emma and I talked for 3 hours that night. By the end, we'd both agreed to take another DNA test. This one comparing Emma to Gerald and Diane. The results would be ready in 10 days. Just in time for my engagement party. Over the next week, I built my case like a lawyer preparing for trial. First, the documents. I had my original True Gene report showing 0% match with both Gerald and Diane. I had Margaret Palmer's handwritten shift log from 1997. She'd finally agreed to let me photograph it. I had a notarized statement from Margaret, signed before a witness at her attorney's office. The hospital threatened me for 28 years, she told me when I picked up the document. I'm 72 now. What are they going to do? Fire me from retirement. Second, the DNA. Emma had submitted her samples to True Gene using the same rush process I had. Her results comparing to Gerald and Diane would arrive 2 days before the engagement party. Third, the witnesses. Grandma Betty would be there. She'd been waiting 28 years for this moment. Margaret Palmer agreed to attend, sitting quietly in the corner until needed. And Emma, my biological sister in spirit, if not in genetics. She'd be waiting in the room next door. Are you sure about this? Nathan asked as we reviewed the plan, confronting him publicly. There's no taking it back. I thought about Mom, about the pill bottle, about 28 years of being called a liar and a cheater. He wanted a public reckoning, I said. He sent that email to 62 people. He called me a cuckoo's egg in front of the entire family. I straightened the stack of documents on my desk. He doesn't get to slink away privately now. Everyone who believed him needs to see the truth. Nathan nodded slowly. Then let's give them a show they'll never forget. 3 days before the engagement party, Emma's DNA results arrived. Subject A, Emma Clark, shows 99.97% genetic match with Subject B, Gerald Mason. Subject A, Emma Clark, shows 99.98% genetic match with Subject C, Diane Mason. I read the numbers 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Then I called Emma. Can you meet me tomorrow? In person. We chose a coffee shop halfway between Portland and Seattle. Neutral ground for 2 women whose entire lives had just been rewritten by science. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 untouched lattes. When she saw me, she stood up so fast her chair nearly tipped over. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. She had brown hair, brown eyes, a strong jawline I'd seen on Tyler 1,000 times, a dimple on her left cheek, the same one Gerald had. And I had blonde hair, blue eyes, a button nose, fair skin that matched the photos Margaret had shown me of Linda Clark. We were strangers who should have been sisters. Sisters who were raised by the wrong families. This is so weird, Emma whispered. Then she laughed. And I laughed. And suddenly we were hugging in the middle of a coffee shop, crying into each other's shoulders while the baristas pretended not to notice. I want to meet them, Emma said when we finally pulled apart. Diane and Gerald. My biological parents. You will, I promised. In 3 days. I didn't tell her that one of those parents would be on his knees when she walked into the room. The engagement party was held at Riverside Estate, Grandma's family home. A beautiful old house with rose gardens and fairy lights strung through oak trees. A proper celebration, Grandma had declared, in a place where Gerald's ego can't reach. 60 guests arrived that evening. Cocktail attire. Aunts and uncles. Cousins. Family friends. And every single person who'd received Dad's accusatory email. I wore a navy blue dress and carried myself like a woman who had already won. Nathan stayed close, his hand on my back, steady as always. Mom arrived with Grandma, eyes still red from crying, but her posture was straighter than I'd seen in years. Something had shifted in her since we'd learned the truth. A weight lifting even before the public vindication. Then Dad arrived. Late, of course. Fashionably late, as he'd call it. Letting the crowd gather. Letting the anticipation build. He wore an expensive suit, his fancy watch catching the light, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. He thought this was his victory lap. He had no idea. I watched him work the room, shaking hands, accepting sympathy from relatives who believed his version of events. Such a difficult situation, I heard an aunt murmur. You've been so patient. Tyler stood beside him, uncomfortable but compliant. The loyal son he'd always been. In the corner, Margaret Palmer sat quietly with a glass of water, hands still trembling after all these years. And in the room next door, through a connecting door to the main hall, Emma Clark waited for her cue. I checked my phone. Nathan nodded. It was time. Halfway through the cocktail hour, Dad asked for a microphone. The room quieted as he stepped onto the small raised platform Grandma had set up for toasts. He cleared his throat, adjusted his jacket, smiled at the crowd like a king addressing his subjects. First, I'd like to congratulate Nathan, he began. You're a brave man marrying into this complicated family. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. But I think we all know why I'm really up here. Dad's gaze found me in the crowd. Something cold flickered in his eyes. There's been a lot of talk lately. A lot of speculation. Asked Tori to take a DNA test. And I know she did. What I don't know is why she's been hiding the results. The room went completely silent. So I thought I'd help her out. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. My son was kind enough to share a copy of the report with me. Tyler had the decency to look ashamed. Dad unfolded the paper with theatrical slowness. 0% genetic match with Gerald Mason. 0% genetic match with Diane Mason. Gasps echoed through the room. Mom gripped Grandma's hand. 28 years. Dad's voice rose with vindicated fury. 28 years I've been telling everyone something wasn't right. And now the science proves it. He turned to Mom. His face contorted with decades of resentment. You lied to me, Diane. You lied to everyone. And now the whole family knows exactly what kind of woman you really are. The silence that followed was absolute. And then I started walking toward the stage. You're right, Dad. My voice was calm as I stepped onto the platform and took the microphone from his hand. He was so surprised he let me. The DNA test shows I'm not your biological daughter. And I'm not Mom's biological daughter either. Dad's smirk widened. A few relatives exchanged knowing glances. But not because Mom had an affair. The smirk faltered. I turned to face the crowd. All 60 of them. Every person who'd received that email. Every relative who'd whispered about my mother for years. Let me introduce you to someone. I nodded toward the side door. Emma stepped through. 28 years old. Brown hair. Brown eyes. A jawline that was unmistakably Mason. The room erupted in murmurs. Someone dropped a champagne glass. Tyler made a strangled sound. This is Emma Clark, I said. She was born 11 minutes before me at St. Mary's Hospital on March 15, 1997. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. The wall-mounted display I'd arranged earlier flickered to life, showing the true gene reports. The night I was born, there was an accident. A trainee nurse mixed up 2 babies after bathing them, and the hospital covered it up to avoid a lawsuit. I let that sink in. Emma's DNA shows a 99.97% match with Gerald Mason. 99.98% match with Diane Mason. Silence. Complete silence. She is your biological daughter, Dad. The daughter you've been searching for. And she's been living in Seattle her entire life because a hospital made a mistake and chose to hide it. Dad's face had gone white. He looked at Emma. Really looked at her. And I watched 28 years of certainty crumble. This is Margaret Palmer. I continued as Margaret rose from her corner seat. She was the head nurse that night. She has a notarized statement confirming everything I just told you. The shift logs. The hospital cover-up. All of it. Margaret stepped forward. Voice shaky but clear. Mr. Mason, I was there. I watched it happen. Your wife never betrayed you. Never. The hospital made us all sign NDAs. They threatened our jobs. Our pensions. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I turned back to Dad. His hands were now gripping the edge of the platform like a man trying not to drown. You wanted science, Dad. Here it is. Every document. Every signature. Every detail about the 11 minutes that changed 2 families forever. Then his knees buckled. Gerald Mason. Proud, arrogant, certain Gerald Mason collapsed onto the platform like a puppet whose strings had been cut. He caught himself on one knee, hands slapping against the hardwood floor, chest heaving with ragged breaths. I didn't know, he whispered. How could I have known? You could have trusted her, I said quietly. My voice carried through the silent room. You could have investigated. You could have looked for other explanations instead of assuming the worst about the woman who loved you. But the hair, the eyes. Genetics are complicated. Recessive genes exist. Hospital mistakes happen. I stepped closer, looking down at the man who had made my childhood a battlefield. But you chose suspicion. You chose cruelty. For 28 years, you punished Mom and me for a crime that never happened. From across the room, I heard a chair scrape back. Tyler. Silent, compliant Tyler. He stood up. For a moment, I thought he would defend Dad, like he always had. Instead, he walked past Dad without a glance and crossed to our mother's side. Mom. His voice cracked. I'm sorry. I should have said something years ago. I should have. Mom pulled him into a hug, her tears soaking into his shoulder. And Dad remained on his knees, watching his family choose each other over him. For 28 years, my mother had lived in Gerald Mason's shadow. She had endured his accusations at breakfast and dinner and every moment in between. She had cried herself to sleep more nights than anyone knew. She had swallowed his cruelty like medicine, telling herself that maybe someday he would see the truth. Now the truth was everywhere. On screens, in documents, in the face of a stranger who carried her blood. Mom stepped forward slowly, her heels clicking against the floor. The crowd parted for her. Even Tyler stepped aside. She stopped in front of Dad, still on one knee, face wet with tears. I'd never seen him cry before. 28 years, Gerald. Her voice was steady, stronger than I'd ever heard it. 28 years I stayed, because I loved you, because I believed that someday you would trust me, because I thought our family was worth fighting for. Dad looked up at her. Diane, She raised her hand, cutting him off.
Not yet.
You don't get to apologize yet. The room held its breath. You owe me an apology in front of every person who received that email. You owe Tori an apology for every birthday you ruined, every graduation you ignored, every moment you made her feel like she didn't belong in her own family. She gestured toward Emma. And you owe Emma an apology for being the father she deserved but never had. Dad's shoulders shook with sobs I hadn't known he was capable of. I didn't need the world to believe me, Gerald. Mom's voice cracked on the last word. I needed you to believe me. And you never did. She turned her back on him and walked to where Emma stood. Hello, she said softly, tears streaming down her face. I'm your mother. I'm so sorry it took so long to find you. It took Dad 3 attempts to stand. Tyler didn't help him. Neither did I. Neither did anyone in that room full of relatives who had until 10 minutes ago believed his version of events. He gripped the edge of the platform, pulled himself upright, reached for the microphone I'd set down. His voice, when he spoke, was barely recognizable. Hoarse. Broken. Stripped of every ounce of arrogance. I was wrong. 3 words. 28 years overdue. I was wrong about Diane. She never, his voice cracked. He tried again. She never betrayed me. I accused her for nearly 3 decades. And I was wrong.
He looked at me.
And for the first time in my life, I saw something other than suspicion in his eyes. Tori, I took things from you I can never give back. Your childhood. Your trust. Money that should have been yours. He swallowed hard. I'll repay your student loans. All of them. It's not enough. But it's a start. Then he turned to Emma. This stranger, who was his daughter. I don't know what to say to you. You're my daughter. And I've missed everything. Your first steps. Your graduations. Your entire life. His voice shattered on the words. That's something I'll regret until the day I die. Emma was crying too. We all were. But her voice was steady. We can start now, she said. If you're willing to actually be a father instead of a judge. Dad nodded, unable to speak. Grandma stepped forward and handed him a tissue from her purse. Clean yourself up, Gerald, she said. Not unkindly. You have a lot of work ahead of you. 1 week after the engagement party, I drove to Seattle. The house was a modest ranch-style home in a quiet suburb. Yellow siding, white trim. A garden of wildflowers that had clearly been someone's labor of love. Nothing like Grandma's estate or Dad's mansion, but warm in a way those houses had never quite managed. Linda Clark answered the door before I could knock. She was 56 years old, blonde hair streaked with silver, blue eyes that were an exact mirror of my own. Looking at her was like looking into a time machine. This was who I would become in 30 years. Tori. Her voice caught on my name. I've been staring at your picture all week. I kept thinking I was dreaming. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like lavender and something else I couldn't identify. Something that felt impossibly like home. We sat in her kitchen for 4 hours. She showed me photographs of her childhood, of my biological grandparents who had passed away years ago, of the life I might have had if a trainee nurse hadn't made a mistake. She told me about her ex-husband David, my biological father, who had died of cancer 3 years ago, never knowing that Emma wasn't his. He used to joke that Emma had old soul eyes, Linda said, wiping tears with a kitchen towel. Now I understand. They were your eyes, Tori. They were always your eyes. I showed her pictures of my childhood too. The blonde baby in a house full of brunettes. The girl who never quite fit. The woman who had finally found out why. I don't want to replace Diane, Linda said. She raised you. She's your mother. She is, I agreed. But maybe there's room for one more. Linda's smile could have lit the entire house. I'd like that, she said. I'd like that very much. 2 months later, I married Nathan Reed in the rose garden of Riverside Estate, surrounded by fairy lights and family, both the one I was born into and the one I was raised by. My mother walked me down the aisle. Not Gerald. My mother. She wore a champagne-colored dress and held her head high, her step steady for the first time in decades. Beside her, I wore a simple white gown that she and Grandma had insisted on buying for me. A proper wedding dress, Grandma had declared. For a proper wedding. Dad sat in the second row, quiet and diminished. He didn't protest when I told him he wouldn't be walking me down the aisle. He didn't argue when I explained that this was Mom's moment, not his. He just nodded and said, I understand. It was a start. Emma stood with my bridesmaids, wearing a deep green dress that brought out the brown of her eyes. Our mother's eyes. Gerald's eyes. She'd met the Masons properly in the weeks after the party. Tentative lunches. Careful conversations that were slowly building toward something like a relationship. Linda Clark sat in the front row of the guest section. A place of honor. She waved when she caught my eye, her own eyes shining with tears. Grandma Betty rose to give a toast. This wedding is not just about 2 people, she said, raising her champagne glass. It's about 2 families finally finding their way back to the truth. It's about a daughter who refused to accept a lie, and a mother who waited 28 years to be believed. She looked at me, then at Emma, then at Mom.
To truth, she said.
However long it takes. To truth, the room echoed, and I drank to that. The lawsuit took 8 months. Emma and I filed jointly against St. Mary's Hospital, represented by a medical malpractice attorney Grandma had found, a woman who specialized in wrongful birth cases. I have a particular interest, she told us with a thin smile, in institutions that think they can cover up their mistakes. Margaret Palmer testified. Her notarized statement backed by the original shift log she'd kept hidden for 28 years. The hospital's lawyers tried to discredit her, citing her age, her NDA, her delayed disclosure. It didn't work. Internal documents surfaced during discovery. Emails between hospital administrators discussing the incident. Memos about risk mitigation. A budget line item labeled potential liability settlement that had been quietly renewed every year since 1997. They'd known. They'd always known. And they'd spent nearly 3 decades praying no one would find out. In the end, the hospital chose to settle rather than face a jury. $450,000 to each family. Total of $900,000. A public apology printed in the Portland Tribune. Mandatory improvements to their newborn identification protocols. And the resignation of the administrator who had ordered the cover-up. Long since retired but now publicly named. We didn't sue for revenge, I told a reporter who showed up at the courthouse steps. We sued so no other family would spend 28 years living a lie that a hospital could have corrected in one day. Margaret Palmer was granted immunity from any personal liability in exchange for her cooperation. She sent me a card afterward. Her handwriting shaky but clear. Thank you for giving me a reason to finally tell the truth. I can sleep now. I kept it in a drawer with my birth certificate. The real one. The one that said 11:58 p.m. The one that told the truth. 6 months after the wedding, Dad invited me to dinner. Just the 2 of us. He'd chosen a quiet Italian restaurant in downtown Portland. Not the River Club. Not anywhere flashy. Just a corner booth with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. He looked older than he had at my engagement party. Grayer. Smaller somehow. As if the weight of his confession had physically diminished him. I wanted to thank you, he said after we'd ordered, for agreeing to see me. You're not my biological father, I said. You never were. But you did raise me. even if you did it badly. He flinched, but nodded. I'm in therapy now, he said. Diane insisted. Well, suggested strongly. We're doing couples counseling too. We've been separated, but we're trying to. He trailed off, searching for words. We're trying to find out if there's anything left to save. I thought about Mom. About the way she'd stood in front of him at the party, demanding the apology she deserved for decades. About the strength it must have taken to consider rebuilding after everything he'd put her through. I remember when you taught me to ride a bike, I said. I was 5. Before you knew about that, before you decided I wasn't yours. You held the seat and ran beside me for an hour until I got it. Dad's eyes filled with tears. I remember, he whispered. That's the father I needed, I said. The one who held on. I'm willing to try, Gerald. But I need you to understand. Forgiveness is a process, not an event. And you have a lot of work to do. He nodded. I know. And I'll do it. However long it takes. I didn't forgive him that night. I'm not sure I've fully forgiven him yet. But I chose to give him the chance Mom never got. The chance to prove he could change. Emma and Tyler met properly for the first time at a family dinner a month after the wedding. It was awkward at first. How do you make small talk with a sibling you should have grown up with? But then Tyler mentioned he was allergic to shellfish. Wait, Emma said. Me too. Since birth. The doctor said it was genetic. What about being left-handed? Tyler asked. Emma held up her left hand. No way. Tyler laughed. A real laugh. Surprised and delighted. 30 minutes later, they discovered they both loved an obscure indie folk band. Both hated cilantro with an inexplicable passion. And both had a habit of tapping their right foot when they were thinking. This is so weird, Tyler said, shaking his head. You're like a mirror. But you know, a girl version. Emma threw a bread roll at him. And for the first time in my memory, a Mason family dinner had genuine laughter. Not the polite, strained kind that Mom had always worked so hard to manufacture. But real laughter. The kind that comes from people who are actually happy to be together. It was a small moment, but it felt like the beginning of something new. 3 months after the wedding, Mom and Linda met for lunch. I wasn't there, but Mom told me about it afterward. Her voice soft with wonder. They'd chosen a cafe halfway between their houses. Neutral ground. Linda had brought photos of Emma's childhood. Mom had brought photos of mine. They'd sat there for 3 hours trading stories about daughters they'd raised but hadn't birthed. She told me about Emma's first words, Mom said. And I told her about yours. We both cried a lot. Was it strange? I asked. Meeting the woman who raised your biological daughter? Mom considered the question for a long moment. I thought it would be, she admitted. I thought I'd feel jealous, resentful. But when I looked at her, all I could think was she loved Emma the same way I loved you. Completely. Without question. She reached across the table and took my hand. We lost 28 years, she said. But we gained each other. And we gained the truth. That has to count for something. Linda and Mom have lunch together once a month now. They've become friends. An unlikely friendship born from shared loss and unexpected connection. They call each other the other mother. And in a strange way, I think it's helped them both heal. I'm sitting in our new apartment now. A 2-bedroom in a nicer part of Portland. Room for Nathan's home office. And space for the nursery we'll need soon. The walls are covered with photographs. My wedding day with Mom on one side and Linda on the other. Emma and me at Thanksgiving. Our first holiday together. Grandma Betty looking triumphant at her birthday party last month. Nathan is in the kitchen making dinner. Something complicated with too many ingredients. I've been thinking a lot about the past year. About identity and family, and what it means to belong. For 28 years, I tried to prove I was a Mason. I straightened my blonde hair to look darker. I learned to golf because Dad loved golf. I studied nursing instead of art because it was practical, reliable, not something a cuckoo's egg would choose. I spent my whole life trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. Now I know I was never supposed to fit. I was someone else's daughter. living someone else's life, carrying someone else's DNA. But here's what I've learned. DNA doesn't make a family. Love does. The woman who held my hand during nightmares, who taught me to read, who stayed married to a man who tortured her just to keep our family together. That's my mother, not biology.
Love.
Nathan walks in with 2 plates and a knowing smile. You're doing that thing again, he says. The deep thinking while staring at nothing thing. I laugh and take the plate he offers. On the coffee table, tucked between a stack of baby-named books and a pregnancy journal, is the test I took this morning. Positive. I don't know whose DNA this baby will carry.
Mine.
Nathan's. Some echo of the Clarks or the Masons. But I know one thing for certain. This child will know they're loved from the very first moment. Without condition. Without doubt. That's the only proof that matters. Final message. If you're watching this and you've ever been accused of something you didn't do by a parent, a partner, anyone who should have trusted you, I want you to know the truth has a way of surfacing. Sometimes it takes 28 years. Sometimes it takes a DNA test and a brave nurse with a guilty conscience. But it surfaces. Don't let anyone's suspicion define your worth. And if you're the one doing the accusing, ask yourself, is my certainty worth destroying the people I love? My father spent 28 years being certain. He was certain Mom cheated. He was certain I wasn't his. He was certain his cruelty was justified. He was wrong about all of it.
Trust is a choice.
Doubt is easy. But 28 years of doubt can destroy a family. 28 years of trust could have saved mine. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation. Until next time, trust the truth, even when it's hard.
The end.